Thank you, Eric, for that presentation. We are now at the part of the event where we are going to move to a panel conversation. And today we're joined by two very special guests from Salesforce. Bharadwaj Tanikella, who's a product manager for Einstein Discovery, and Darvish Shadravan, who's a distinguished solution engineer at Salesforce. I can just see Bharadwaj. Darvish, I'm going to give you a second to put your camera on. There you are. Okay, before I get into questions, I'm just going to give you guys 30 seconds each, just kind of introduce yourselves, tell us who you are, and then we'll move into some questions.
Sure, I'll go first. So my name is Bharadwaj. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm super excited to communicate and say hi to the community. A bit about myself, I've been with Salesforce about 6 years, predominantly as an engineer. So 5.5 years I was building products. So mostly the past 4.5 years, I was building Einstein Discovery as an engineer. So if you do notice any issues, feel free to let me know. I can totally fix them. And then recently transitioned into product management and building Einstein Discovery. So predominantly focusing on stories and how do we make it better? How do we make things more consumable and working on the infrastructure side of things and building for scale. Right? How do we make it where we can provide access to larger data sets, and how do we make Einstein Discovery faster? So those are the things which I'm working on, but super excited to be here and get to know you guys. Darvish?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Bharadwaj. Yeah, hey, everybody. So my name's Dervish. I'm a data scientist and a solution engineer on the Einstein / Tableau team here at Salesforce. I primarily work with enterprise customers, helping them solve machine learning and data science type of business challenges with Einstein Discovery and Tableau CRM. And I've been in the trenches with the product ever since we acquired it 3 or 4 years ago, back when it was Beyond Core. So I've had a number of experiences with large customers doing hands-on projects. So happy to answer any questions that you guys might have for me. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for that, guys. Now, we sourced a number of questions from for our attendees prior to the event today, but I want to start with one of mine, and it's going to be for you, Darvish. I happened to come across a white paper of yours that was quite interesting. I thought this would be a good kind of question for you to answer for everybody to understand, everybody that hasn't had an opportunity to read it. But in your view, what makes Einstein Discovery kind of unique in the landscape of AI and machine learning in general? And you know, what kind of organizations can benefit, you know, and kind of maybe give us an example of kind of typical use cases.
Sure. Yeah, so there's a couple of questions in there. That's awesome. I'm still getting used to this Zoom virtual background, so sometimes you can see half my head and sometimes you can see anyway, sorry. So it's kind of fun. I'll start actually with the latter half of the question, which, so I think, you know, Eric's example is a great one of where, I mean, you know, clearly our normal customer scenario is going to be someone using Einstein Discovery to help solve a business challenge that's usually related to Salesforce data. And that could be anything from, you know, helping salespeople prioritize their leads to helping someone in a call center, you know, properly diagnose a customer problem and maybe make a recommendation on how to solve it. Or, I mean, there's all kinds of sort of standard use cases for this product. But I think, you know, like with Eric's example, like when you get creative, it really, there is really no organization that could not benefit from some type of machine learning with a tool like Einstein Discovery. So I really think it's, you know, across the board, whether it's commercial or you know, sports or almost anything, really, everybody could benefit from it one way or another. That's what's so cool about Eric's example is it's fun, but it also just really illustrates the power of data for it's kind of an unusual use case for us. So to the first question, I don't probably have time to fully do it justice, but as I'm sure a lot of the folks on the phone know, there are literally hundreds of tools in the market that do you know, predictive modeling, machine learning, AI. And, you know, and this particular product, Einstein Discovery, fits kind of a unique niche in that it, first of all, it's, you know, it's part of Salesforce. So it's very well connected to Salesforce data. And now, of course, with the Tableau acquisition, we have connectivity directly between between Einstein Discovery and Tableau with a new SKU that we released recently for Tableau specifically. So all this native connectivity makes it kind of a unique product, and it's designed for people who don't necessarily have a data science or machine learning background, right? So I think, to Eric's story, sometimes the bigger challenge is actually just gathering all the data and wrangling it. But once you have done that and you put it into Einstein Discovery, it churns out what we call a story very, very quickly. And almost anyone, whether you're a business person or a subject matter expert in a particular, part of your company, or you're a data analyst or whatever your role is, like, you can get return on investment from Einstein Discovery very quickly, right? So it's designed to be super fast, super scalable, millions or even billions of rows of data, right? Just right out of the box. And the ability to iterate on these stories and collaborate around it. So there's a lot of unique value propositions with the product that sort of set it, kind of a category of its own almost, really. As you mentioned, that's why I wrote the white paper, actually, because we get this question a lot, like, why is this different than any of the other tools that are already out there? So yeah, awesome question. I hope that helped. I'm trying to summarize a lot in a hurry there. So yeah.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bharadwaj, I've got one for you. Just what would you kind of give as best practices for as the best way to kind of get started with Einstein Discovery, just in terms of determining use cases and then actually how to get started,
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, to Dervish's point, right? So the value proposition of Einstein Discovery is to make it easy for you to declaratively create a machine learning model, right? So, and we want to make it easier for you to access it, right? And I would go as far as saying democratizing AI, right? So that's the play we're playing, right? That's the game we're playing. So when it comes to that, to answer your question, the best way to get started is to get started, right? So the thing is, like, there's always this initial friction where it's like, oh, will I be able to create something for it, right? So what we are trying to do is, there are multiple ways to do it. So you can use the fast start templates, which we provide, which says, okay, we will do all the work for you to create the data flow, which can allow you to use the product, or essentially get your feet wet with the product. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide what kind of questions you want to solve, right? So one of Eric's slides were regarding, he had like 4 different predictions outcomes, right? So one of them were based on qualification, like where this driver is going to qualify, is this driver going to finish, etc., right? So those two questions, right? So the questions can be condensed into the problem space which we work on. So the problem space which Einstein Discovery works on are numeric and binary classification. So numeric, so Einstein Discovery universe is revolving in this nucleus, right? So the numeric case is there a number I can predict? Is there a number which I can learn about and predict, right? So for example, your qualification, like where does the driver qualify from 1 to 20, right? And the other thing is binary classification, which is basically 2 buckets, right? Yes or no, true or false, etc., right? So in this case, is this driver going to finish, right? Like, is this driver going to finish the race, yes or no, right? So questions of that sort. So that's the nucleus where Einstein Discovery Universe is built on, and we make it easier. Again, like we make it very easy for you to get started, but the best way and the best practice is to just get started, right? And don't be afraid of it, because I'll be very honest here and very candid. The first model you create is not going to be the perfect one ever, right? And if you do, please do let me know, because I would love to hire you. But the thing is, it's not always the case where the first model is always going to be perfect, right? You have to do iterations, and we make it easy for you to iterate through the models, through the stories, and So long story short, just get started, and that's the best way.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm sure most of our attendees, that, especially those that kind of said they have no prior experience with Einstein, will find that answer quite useful. Just kind of get stuck in there and kind of see what you come up with, and the the emphasis is on the refinement as opposed to getting it right first time. Okay, cool. So a question that kind of came up quite often, and I'll address this one to you, Darvish, just in terms of best ways of getting buy-in from, or unlocking budget for Einstein, building a case for, why do we need to spend extra money and time and resource on this tool? In terms of building a case for kind of the, sponsors and senior management, etc. What would be your advice for someone who was asking on kind of tips around that?
Sure. Yeah. No. Great question. So, in my day job, right, I get pulled into a lot of customer opportunities from the sales teams at Salesforce, and when I engage with them, typically the very first thing I ask is, do we have a good grasp on what the specific use cases that the customer cares about that we know or they know has a high return on investment associated with it, right? So, for example, a lot of the customers we work with, obviously in Salesforce, they'll have a lot of account records, right? And so sometimes I'll work with a customer where their goal is simply to use machine learning to prioritize which accounts or which opportunities are most likely to lead to revenue, right? So that sounds fairly simple, but there's a lot of data that can be injected into that use case. So if we truly understand what the use cases are that the executives and the business leaders at the customer care about, then we can sort of work backwards into how do we justify the cost of it, right? Because we know if we start there, then we know there's dollars associated with any gains that we might get from using Einstein Discovery. So that's where I always start, is like, do we know what the high priority use cases are that their business leaders or sales managers or whoever it is, what they care about, right? So for sure, that's the most natural place to start. I mean, and then there's clearly a longer discussion around data and other things. But really, if you start there, then you can sort of get to done much more quickly, because I typically like to have 2 or 3, like whether it's lead scoring or time to close a case or whatever it might be. Let's know those going in, and we can associate ROI with it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that does. So to summarize, in your view, kind of identifying your high priority use cases is probably the most fundamental step, and then kind of working back from there.
Manny, yeah, cool. do you mind if I add something to it?
Perfect.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing is, Darvish is absolutely right. And another thing to note is, especially with the whole investments going into AI, and the whole market is going after AI and trying to embed AI as part of the business, right? The best, one of the suggestions which I heard recently is, especially when it coming to embedding AI as part of a business and trying to make a sale saying, how do you do it, is going after 3 things, right? Like, so AI is going to be used for revenue, maximizing revenue, minimizing cost, right? And minimizing risk, right? These are the 3 main use cases when it comes to AI as, for any business, right? So, and the way to go after is like, there's a suggestion which was made is that, go after revenue first. How do you use cases around maximizing revenue, right, for your business, right? Because like at the end of the day, the execs will care about how do they maximize revenue, and then go after minimizing costs for that, and then finally look after risk assessment and risk use cases. So that would be like a going after those use cases with that mindset of going after revenue. Let's see what we can do to improve the revenue is a great way for making the case for ROI.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. So to summarize, kind of look at use cases that are aimed at maximizing revenue first. Those are the biggest win. Then at minimizing cost, and then around kind of mitigating risk.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. And I have a question for you, Bharadwaj. We've spoken about this before. So I know you're quite kind of passionate about kind of do's and don'ts of kind of training your data model, etc. I've spoken to you on this before. So if you could just kind of tell the audience, again, kind of best practices around kind of optimizing your model, training your data. For example, things like deciding what fields to include in a story and which not to. We saw a good use case from Eric earlier around kind of his learnings around what data to include, what data not to include. So Would you be able to kind of expound on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the gist of it is, you know your data better than we do, right? So we give you information about the data which you provide us through statistical methods, right? So your R squared, your correlation, everything around that, where we provide you information when it comes to the story setup portion, where we say, hey, it seems like a specific field, it has a high correlation on your outcome, right? The outcome you've chosen, right? So something of that sort where it says, something is going to skew your results quite a bit, right? Where it's like probably possibly a proxy, etc. Right? So I can throw data science terms about this, but at the end of the day, you know your data better than anyone, right? So you working with the use case know your data better than anyone. I mean, the general suggestions are obviously make sure that there's no data leakage issues. There's no there's no multi-collinearity or something where there are similar fields where they're proxy, right? So month of churn versus churn is the same thing, right? If month of churn is filled in, seems like the customer does churn, right? Something of that sort. We provide information about that using the correlation in the story setup portion of it. But at the end of the day, the feature engineering, which we call it in the machine learning terms, is depending on how you understand the data, right? So for, as you mentioned, Eric's use case, where he was talking about using Lewis Hamilton, right? So he's using an absolute term of, let me use the Lewis Hamilton's name versus a relative position. So it's like, okay, how far did he finish from the race leader instead, right? So it's based on the specific race instead of the absolute value of Lewis Hamilton and his proficiency as a 7-time world champion, right? So something of that sort is, again, it comes from intuition about the data and understanding how it might affect the outcome, right? And obviously using the tools which we provide with the what do you say, with the R squared correlation with the data alerts which we provide. So those can be helpful, but at the end of the day, it's you who know the data can make the decisions if something can help your outcome or not, something affects your outcome or not. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. And then another question that came up quite often, and this is addressed to you, Darvish, in terms of, are you able to give any examples of the biggest mistakes you've seen during an Einstein Discovery implementation, or maybe not mistakes, maybe learnings, maybe things that would be key for listeners in the audience to learn from?
Sure. How many hours do I have for my response on this?
Take your time.
No, just a couple of thoughts. One, well, and I alluded to this before, but not having identified the use cases is a real problem, right? If you approach it starting as sort of just a kicking the tires science experiment, that's fine for learning. But if you really want to get budget approved for it, you need to engage both the business leaders and the end users to understand what will actually help them in their daily flow of their job, right? I mean, that's what Einstein Discovery is so good at, is rapidly building these models and then injecting that into the daily workflow, whether I'm a salesperson or in service or marketing or whatever, making my life easier because I can now prioritize my work in a smarter way, right? So keep that in mind. Like, that should always be top of mind when you're thinking about it. On the technical side, the biggest challenges I've helped customers with usually revolves not so much around, oh, I don't have data science skills, or, oh, I don't understand Einstein Discovery, because, as Eric and others have pointed out, it's a relatively easy tool to use. But data still matters, right? And so the biggest challenges I've seen is when customers either have not really given thought to where am I going to get the data, or how am I going to pull the data together. And one of my early proof of concepts I worked on with a very large telecom customer, it turned out that they had data for the use case that we were doing, which was basically, I want to understand what the likelihood of any given customer calling into our call center. I want to understand what the likelihood of their call to escalate to the next level, like escalate it up to a manager or whatever, right? So to do that prediction, we needed data that came from multiple sources, Salesforce and other places. And some of the teams that owned those data elements had actually never talked before. So the first time they ever even met was on a call with us. And so I guess it's not really it wasn't a problem per se, but it was just a lesson learned that like, this is in a larger customer, it will require a cross collaboration effort that will involve the business. It will involve data professionals at some level, right? People who own the data or people who are maybe data, scientists or engineers. And it will involve, typically the Salesforce team, right? So Salesforce admin. So thinking about it more holistically and like, we're going to attack a really significant business challenge with machine learning and Einstein Discovery, who needs to be involved? So that's not so much a problem, but it's more just of a lesson learned from being in the trenches. So those are a couple of random thoughts. I could keep going on this for quite a while if we really wanted to get into the weeds on the technical details, but I think maybe I'll leave it there for now. And if there's other questions on that one, I'm happy to address it.
Well, I did see Bharadwaj nodding along a couple of times. So I wonder if you've got anything to add. Or...
No, he got the biggest umbrellas, right? So I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, it's Einstein Discovery or any AI product is not a panacea for all your problems, right? Like, so the thing is, and it is, it's a great tool which can help you. And the thing is, like, I always say garbage in, garbage out philosophy, right? Like, so, it's essentially whatever data you put in is the result which you get. And it's very easy to blame the product, saying, hey, this AI product doesn't work as expected because it's not giving me the answers where it's supposed to. But at the end of the day, it's completely about the data shape, the schema. Are you using the right things? Is very important. So, but yeah, most of it is covered by Darvish.
No, cool. And again, something else that I know you're quite excited about. We spoke about it before. Bharadwaj, this is. Are you able to share anything kind of upcoming on the Einstein Discovery roadmap? Is there anything that you feel might be beneficial for people to learn from today?
Absolutely. And this is the forward-looking statement. I don't have the slide up, but please do make your purchasing decision based on what's publicly available. Obviously the gist of it. One of the things which we're working on, which we're very happy and we're very excited is two things. One is improving our existing interfaces, so user interface to make it easier, to make things a lot faster, make a better experience for you to understand how the story is, what are the things that you need to focus on. So in summer 21, we're coming out with the summary charts where we summarize the entire story, where you open up a story, where we provide you the top 10 positive and top 10 negative insights, right? Something which is very important, where you don't want to scroll through the insights to understand the data. So that's number one. Number two is on again, there are a lot more UI specific and UX user experience specific improvements which we have done, which we're very proud of. And then the other side is the data science-y, more model building portion of it. And within that, we are focusing on, so Einstein Discovery historically has been dealing with data which is pretty organized, right? So it's where we have like 100 cardinality, or basically we need to have it like structured data, right? We work with structured data. So when it comes to unstructured data, so for example, your case description or something which has notes in it, right? So those things cannot be used, or what hasn't been utilized within Einstein Discovery context, but we are working hard to make sure that we're taking care of those use cases for unstructured data, right? So anything related to open text, how do you derive value from it? Is it through sentiment? Is it through getting the most important words and highlighting that and then using that as part of the story, right? Something of that sort, where we're investing a lot in making sure that we can derive more information from unstructured text as well as structured text, which we all already do, right? So those are the things which we're very excited for you guys to get your hands on, because we really think that it unlocks a lot of use cases, specifically in the service sector, where information is important, right? Especially with the notes, for example, and case descriptions. So yeah, again, forward-looking statement.
As always.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a little bit more time, so I'm going to double back a little bit, just to maybe expand on some of the things we were talking about earlier. So, Darvish, in your view, who would be a typical kind of Einstein Discovery user within an organization? Who would be the internal product owner, so to speak, and what kind of skill set would they require?
Yeah. No, awesome question. And I think there's been some talk about that on the chat too. So the short answer is it depends. And it depends on a number of things, including the size of the organization, what resources you have available, et cetera. Now, the legacy of Einstein Discovery, back when it was called BeyondCore, it was definitely designed. I mean, part of the marketing around the product was it was designed for, business users, right? Power users who wanted to understand their data and use the power of machine learning. And that has evolved now, because now almost any persona can get benefit from using Einstein Discovery, whether you are, a traditional data analyst, or whether you're a Salesforce admin, or whether you are a Tableau CRM expert, or a data scientist. A lot of my time is spent actually with our customers and their data science teams, trying to understand like why this is different or unique compared to the work they're already doing, where they're writing code to do a lot of this. And part of what I often explain to them is they shouldn't view it as competition. They should view it as a complementary, part of the offering. And they actually have the opportunity now to do, more things like maybe mentoring people on how to put the data together to use an Einstein Discovery. So their skills are still applicable. They might just be using them in different ways. So the short answer to your question is, like, there's no, it's tough to say this is the persona for using Einstein Discovery, because honestly, I've worked with customers where it's everywhere from someone who's just not very technical, but they're a subject matter expert on the data and they just need to learn the tool. And they often are the best person to use Einstein Discovery because they really understand the data really well. They don't really care so much about the data sciencey stuff that's happening on the back end. They just want results. On the other hand, at almost all of our large customers, there's usually a data professional of some title that's involved, data scientist, data engineer, whatever. So yeah, I don't like to pigeonhole it into one category or one persona. Like, I think there's benefits that come out of this product for almost anybody that wants to get insights for data. And again, back to Eric's really super cool demo that I've seen before, and I would encourage everyone to go watch those videos. It's just a great example of like that's a very non-traditional use case for us, right? And so it's just a great example of someone who is using Einstein Discovery to tackle an unusual and interesting use case, and and he's living proof that it can be done. So hope that helps. This is a discussion I get into often around what sort of skills do I need and who from the customer, and the answer is it depends a little bit.
I was kind of hoping that was going to be your answer. It's not limited to data scientists. There are a range of kind of different personas and profiles that could be your typical user. And again, that kind of harks back to Bharadwaj's earlier answer, that the best way of getting is just get stuck in.
Yeah.
And it's accessible to pretty much everybody. And so on that note, and this will be the last question. So a quick kind of, I'm loath to kind of ask it, but everybody always does anyway, just in terms of learning resources to learn the tool. I won't ask you to name a whole list of places where people can learn, but maybe your top kind of one or two learning resources, each of you, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure, I'll go. So I'm going to say Trailhead. Pretty obvious, right? So Trailhead is the first thing, and we do make sure that we embed the information which we provide to, for example, the model metrics page. We provide adequate information as part of the tooltips. But if you are, so the thing is, like, I think there was one slide where, Eric was mentioning product knowledge, and then there's knowledge about machine learning as well, where it's like data knowledge, product knowledge, and then machine learning knowledge, right? So, so for product knowledge, please do check out the Trailheads. We are updating it pretty often, and obviously, like, look out for webinars or Ricky's blog, pretty amazing. For those resources, right? But for machine learning knowledge, again, there's so many things available, but I would get started on how you can embed AI for business, right? So specifically for, AI for business, and there's a bunch of Udemy courses which are available. So if you are interested, that would be a great place to get started for, understanding what machine learning is and understanding the jargon, right? So the jargon which just gets thrown out, that would be a great place to get started.
Cheers. And for you, Darvish, in less than 1 minute.
Yeah, no, I think he covered most of the obvious ones. I would also I'd give a shout out to, there's a number of really good blog articles that Ricky has curated on the salesforceblogger.com site that she owns. And several people from the product team and folks like myself who work with customers at Salesforce have done some articles on there around Einstein Discovery. So I would, in addition to the trailheads, when you want to go one level deeper, those blog articles can actually be super useful. So I'd point people there as well.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm sure everybody will join me in thanking you both for your time. Thank you very much for joining. I am now going to hand back over to Ricky.